Andrew, just 2 weeks ago, you had a big event.
Good day.
The biggest IPO of the year so far, the largest ever semiconductor IPO, if my math serves. You've been in the industry a long time. I've been watching it for a very long time. We don't see a lot of chip-related startups, much less chip startups that make it to IPO. How does AI change that?
Well, first, chips are really hard. And so most of us have either aged out or died.
They're a little expensive to make, too, I hear.
Yeah. This one here is what we built. It's the largest chip ever made. Thank you.
They're clapping for big chips.
Yeah,
wow, that's a switch.
It only cost $500 million in 10 years of my life to get it to work. And what we got for that was the fastest AI processor ever built. We solved a problem that had been open in the compute industry for 75 years, which is how to build a big chip. And we solved it, and we delivered a product, and we were so proud. And we announced this in August of 2019, and absolutely nobody cared. Nobody cared. And it took the world a little while to catch up. And starting in 2025, the AI models got smart enough such that people began to use AI. And once people began to use AI, speed mattered. And in the way we use AI is with inference, and what we do is the fastest inference in the world, not by a little bit, but by more than 15x. And so that's how we ended up in this sort of extraordinary place, getting public 2 weeks ago.
And in the run-up to that, you scored some pretty significant validating customer wins, including AWS, and I find that relationship fascinating because it really exemplifies the way you handle inference and you disintegrate the process, right? Where the AWS Trainium handles one part, and then you take the part of inference where you decode. So talk a little bit about that, and more to the point, talk about how that is a blueprint, or can be a blueprint, for work with other hyperscalers.
We had a pretty good 90-day run. We did a deal north of $20 billion with OpenAI in a committed take-or-pay deal. And then 45 days later, we signed a big deal with AWS. Yeah. The idea in most cases as a computer architect is to try and look at a problem and think about what the right machine is for it. Should you design the machine? Can we use somebody else's machine? And what we saw in 2015 and 16 was the rise of a new workload. And we thought, well, this workload's going to eat a lot of compute. This new AI is going to eat an extraordinary amount of compute. And we made two contrarian bets at the time. The first was we will build dedicated silicon for it. And number two, we will not build something that looks like a GPU. We will start with a clean sheet of paper and build something entirely different. And both of those, at the time, people thought we were mad, and it turned out we were dead right. Now, if you fast forward 10 years, there is so much demand right now on inference because the AI starting in about 2025 became so smart that it can do important things, and we're using it more and more and more. And so again, we looked at the work. What is the essence of the inference problem? And it's comprised of two parts. It's comprised of a part called processing the prompt. And don't be fooled for a minute. We just invent complicated names for no reason in AI. It's just we are so full of it. It's amazing. We're going to call that prefill for no reason at all. And all that is it's processing the prompt. And then there's a second part, which is generating the answer. So you process the prompt and you generate the answer. We call the first part prefill and the second part decode. And it turns out they have some very different compute characteristics. And so we thought to ourselves that there are machines that are better than us at this prefill. It is a parallelizable problem. It has fundamentally different characteristics than the decode, which is a strictly sequential problem. And so we took this observation and we went to AWS and said, we can use your Trainium part to do the prefill, and we'll use our big chip to do the decode, and what we will get is this extraordinary solution. And it turned out to be really well received, and we're now engaged in that process of using other people's part for part of the problem and our part for another part of the problem, sort of with all members of the community.
Other hyperscalers?
That aren't NVIDIA, so everybody but them.
I want to come back to that in a minute. We talked about disintegration, but in chip making, isn't it inevitable that generalization and kind of getting away from a disintegrated approach wins out? Isn't it the case that isn't there almost inevitability there? And what happens if that's the case?
No. I think the battle between the specialist and the generalist is a really interesting sort of battle. And whether it's in the savannah in Africa, whether it's with small companies going up against big companies, the thing that determines whether the specialist beats the generalist or the generalist beats the specialist is the shape of the resource landscape. Right? If the vein of resources that the specialist is targeted at is very large, the specialist crushes it and they win. If the resource landscape is made of lots of little different pockets of resources, the generalist wins. So where did x86 win? It won in this landscape that was filled with lots of different use cases. Where did the GPU win? It won on discrete graphics work, one workload. Where did the x86 machine win everywhere? Why didn't it also win in the cell phone? Because ARM built a thing that was 100% focused on running off a battery and very low power. And so here are two examples where the specialist absolutely clocked the generalist. In other cases, the resource landscape wasn't enough. Members of the industry, myself included, tried to build a specialist. There wasn't enough for us to eat. So we ate a little bit, then we starved, as the generalist sort of gathered up all sorts of resources. So what we saw in 2015 was that this rise of AI would create so much demand for compute that it was best served with a specialist. And that was sort of one of the winning observations.
The other big customer win you mentioned, OpenAI. Uniquely structured. We're seeing that OpenAI and other LLMs are having to, become increasingly creative about the ways that they finance and they pay for these compute agreements, like with yours. Because of this great demand that you reference and that is all around us, right? Hundreds of billions of dollars being spent. Do you have concerns about their ability to generate the revenue and raise the financing that they need in order to meet their obligations?
I think maybe another way to ask that question is, do I think there's an AI bubble? Can the leaders keep going? He says. I think if you
is the growth pace sustainable,
right.
And will the end user demand materialize in a quick? We've both been around this. This is not our first rodeo.
No, one of the few advantages of not being young is it's not your first rodeo. I think the following. I think historically bubbles were characterized by a notion of if you build it, they will come. And I saw some people I recognized in the audience who were with me in the late 90s when we were building out data networking equipment, and people were putting huge amounts of fiber in the ground on the assumption that it would come. And economists like to go back for reasons that are unclear to me to the railroads. And you know, a lot of good analogies from the 1870s. And you know, they were also, if you build it, they will come. What is unusual about AI right now is the builders are so far behind the demand, it's absurd. We have a backlog of more than $25 billion of demand. That there are none of us, not AMD, not NVIDIA, that can keep up with the demand that your employees are driving. And that's sort of, in a lot of ways, the opposite of a bubble. We are chasing, right? Our customers and their customers are moving at the speed of software. And we're moving at the speed of real estate, data centers, right? And so we are behind.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit more. I mean, you did a podcast with one of my colleagues from Bloomberg Intelligence, and you were talking about if there's a constraint right now for you, it's in access to the data center. We're seeing around the country, especially in an election year, a lot of pushback, a lot of objection to, I don't want that in my backyard. How are you coping with that?
Two different things. First is all of us are constrained by data centers right now. If you talk to Cerebras, we have a cloud. We're constrained by data centers. AWS is constrained by their data center deployment. Facebook, I mean, everybody is constrained by their data center deployments. So that's number one. Number two is a separate issue, and that's why is the world angry at us. And they're angry at us because we were dopes. Not us particular, but our industry. We could have stepped out into these communities and been good neighbors. We could have gone to these communities and used their processes, their local governments, to gain approval and buy-in. We could have been good neighbors. We could have paid our way, paid sufficient sort of funds in the development of these data centers so that the local community was never on the hook for a nickel. We could have shared how a data center of 150, 200 megawatts, which isn't giant, will create thousands of jobs for several years in construction alone. We could have shared how, for example, we use less water in a giant data center than a small restaurant. Do you know in the entire U.S., data centers use less water than the almond growers in California? Not by 1x or 2x or 3x or 4x, but between 5 and 7x, almonds consume more water than data centers. And so what we did is we raced ahead, and it might be that we're sort of low EQ and we're better at talking to machines than people as an industry. But we raced ahead, and we didn't think about the communities into which we were putting these data centers. Brad Smith and Microsoft came along, and they put out sort of a call to action for everybody. It was just common sense. It had 5 thoughtful sort of pillars, and in the end it was like, treat them like your neighbors, right? And it is absolutely possible that you go into a community and you build a data center, the community loves you, you create jobs, the tax base increases by a lot. I mean, we have heavy equipment on site. We can build a baseball field for the school. As a community, we could have done a better job, and we blew it, and we didn't win over the community.
And what will you do differently?
I'm not a data center builder. I'm a data center buyer, and so we are engaged in the communities in which we have data centers. We are engaged with the local Chamber of Commerce. We're engaged with the community to the best of our ability. We also have chosen data centers that are in rural areas, that are far away. You'll hear sometimes that we don't have enough power in the U.S. That's not true. We have plenty of power. It's just not near anything. And so it's a little more expensive to get to. Our power's in West Texas. Our power's in rural Utah. Our power's in parts of Louisiana that nobody wants to live in. Our power's in Niagara. Canada has more power than they know what to do with it. Not only do they have falling water, they've got trapped natural gas in places. And so you have to go to where the power is. And I think you have to think about how to get the results, the tokens out with fiber optic cables, so you've got to put those in. But I think it is not an either or. And we just, as an industry, did a poor job of stepping into communities and being good neighbors.
As you look at, customer wins, we saw from, your early relationship, pivotal, important relationship with G42, that you need to diversify your customer base. You've done that with Meta, with AWS. Yeah. Where should give us some guideposts as to where we should look for the next big wins and how long it may be before we see that materialize? So
it is very curious, and it never occurred to me, and certainly in the private world, nobody says, you've got this huge customer. It's bad.
But it accounted for such a significant percentage of your revenue that it
accounted for all our manufacturing is what it accounted for. So in 2023, late in 2023, we did $1 billion deal with the AI champion in the UAE, a company called G42. And they were one of the first movers in the world. And we went to market, and we went to raise money, and people said, you've only got one big customer. And then we won OpenAI, and they did a $20+ billion deal, and people said, now you've only got one big customer. I said, well, I used to have one, and now I still have one, only it's 20 times bigger. It's one of the biggest deals in the history of Silicon Valley. And then we won AWS. I think the truth is several things. First, this industry is going to have very, very big customers. NVIDIA did what? Somebody knows, $68 billion last quarter. And 4 customers accounted for half. That's the world we play in, right? And so there are going to be extraordinary customer concentration. And some of those customers actually service hundreds of other customers. So G42 is a cloud for the UAE ecosystem. There are universities in Abu Dhabi. There are oil companies in Dubai. There are hundreds of different users, but they aggregate up to one spot, and they're one customer. In the same way, when we sell to OpenAI, what are we actually selling to? We're selling to millions of individual users who are using the compute.
I'd love to get a sense of you. OpenAI just introduced a model based on Cerebras. What are some early learnings from that? What are some takeaways? And what are some metrics that you can share with performance-wise? Tokens per second, whatever the metric is.
So what we know, and Google showed this years ago in 2009, there's an interesting paper that even very small changes in the amount of time it takes to get an answer back affect your enjoyment of the service. Milliseconds slower produces unbelievably significant results in how long you stay, how frequently you use, even if you're not aware of it. And we know this, and if you think about it, you say, well, how big is the market for slow search? Why? Right? How big is the market for dial-up internet? Right? How much would I have to pay you to rip out broadband? $1,000 a month? Would you work slow internet at home? No. Right? AI is going to be the same way. Nobody wants slow AI. If I ask you to wait 8 seconds for a website to resolve, you lose your mind. And so once a technology becomes enmeshed in what we do every day, right, the speed with which you use it becomes fundamental. And when you are so much faster, you feel it in everything you do. The guy who designed OpenClaw, Peter Steinberger, he said that using us was like giving him Thor's hammer. And he said that's what it was like to be a coder with our speed. And so your users will be more productive. They'll get more done in an hour. They will, and that advantage concatenates and increases at over time. And so that's what speed has always brought.
There's a price sensitivity that's like kind of being built into the market right now, whereas earlier we heard about token maxing, and now we're hearing about meters and limits, and how is that? Is that real? Is it widespread, and is it changing the pace of?
No, I'm going to date myself here, so hold on. I've got a story. I remember when Costco, the first warehouse store, came to Palo Alto. It opened in Redwood City, and my mother would shop Costco the same way she would shop Safeway. She'd go down every aisle. And as you know, that's a horrible mistake at a Costco, right? Because you make 2 mistakes and they're $19 each, and you end up with a tub of mayo this big that for some reason you thought was a good idea, right? Now, what happened 2 or 3 years later was nobody shopped Costco like that. You went to the back and got the cheap chicken, right? And you looked at your list and you went over there and you got the big box of cupcakes because your kid's got a birthday. And you changed completely the way you shopped. That's what's happening right now with tokens. At first, it was like, hey, have at it, right? And Microsoft woke up one day and said, tokens are expensive. And right, we can't let everybody use as much Anthropic as they want. What a strange observation. Which other resource do we let everybody use as much as they want? Right? It was just boneheaded from the get-go. Right? I mean, of course you have to allocate resources in your organization. There are some people you should get out of their way. They're unbelievably productive in everything. There are other people, you got to meter them. It's the way the world works, right? Do you need Spark or GPT or the highest end model for every problem? You don't need a Ferrari to go to the grocery store, right? Use a lower cost open source model. And so what we're learning is how to shop in Costco. We are learning, we have this abundance now, and we're learning how not to buy the $18 tub of mayo. And we just got to step back and we got to say to ourselves, okay, we're going to use the expensive models here, and we're going to use open source models here. And here's some people we're going to allocate to each of these buckets, and that's how we're going to go. And I think this is the learning that you're seeing happening extremely quickly.